Now in our 26th year, a quarter century of service to the worldwide amateur radio community, we are This Week in Amateur Radio, your all-amateur radio and technology news magazine and bulletin service of the air. This is edition number 1373, with a release and air date of Saturday, June 21st, 2025. Please take the program to your air following the Q-tone. Heard every week on the amateur radio bands all around the world, broadcast on low-power AM and FM stations all across the United States, and podcast on the internet since 1993, we are This Week in Amateur Radio, the worldwide premier amateur radio and technology news magazine and bulletin service of the air. Here are the stories for release around the earth as we come to air with edition number 1373 of This Week in Amateur Radio. The ARRL Amateur Radio Field Day is next weekend, and we will have all of those last-minute tips to help make your activation a success. The theft of copper at broadcast AM radio transmitter sites continues. We will have the latest. A farmer planting a field accidentally pulls down a broadcast radio tower with his tractor. The U.S. Senate confirms Olivia Trusty to the FCC to fill Jessica Rosenworcel's term. The SAQ Grimeton alternator will be on the air for its 100th anniversary on July 2nd. A NASA probe receives signals that have upward propagation through the ice and rock of Antarctica. President Trump urges EchoStar and FCC Chairman Brendon Carr to cut a deal on spectrum. Amateur radio operators doing a Summits on the Air activation prevent a major forest fire in the California mountains. Ham Radio 2025, Europe's largest amateur radio exhibition, is coming up soon. A teenage champion at copying Morse code looks to break his own record. If you are looking for work, the ARRL has job openings at its Newington headquarters. We will tell you all about them. The Wireless Institute of Australia files comments on the proposed IARU consolidation. And do hams want to have fun? We will explore that question in this week's report. These headline stories will come to you in a moment along with this week's special features. We'll visit with Bruce Page, KK5DO, and get an update from AMSAT and what's new with all of those amateur satellites in orbit. Australia's own Anno Benshoff, VK6FLAB, and Foundations of Amateur Radio will present us with some random serendipity. Our own amateur radio historian, Will Rogers, K5WLR, will be here with another edition of A Century of Amateur Radio. This week, Will takes us aboard the Wayback Machine to the year 1921, where we find that Marconi had first done it back in 1901. For amateurs, crossing the Atlantic was the next natural challenge. They had been thinking about it since before the war. Many in the scientific community were skeptical that such a feat could possibly be achieved at such short wavelengths as 200 meters, especially with power as low as 1 kilowatt. This week's edition of A Century of Amateur Radio is entitled Crossings. And we will stop by and visit with Bill Sawyers, AJ8B in the DX Corner, with all of the latest news on DXpeditions, DX, upcoming radio sport contests, and a lot more. That's all straight ahead as North America's premier amateur radio and technology news magazine and bulletin service, This Week in Amateur Radio, takes to the air right now. Reporting from our headquarters facility just outside Albany, New York, and sweltering in this 100-degree heat, I'm George, W2XBS.
And reporting from Dallas, where summer reminds us that everything is bigger in Texas, including the UV forecast. I'm Tammy, KI5ODE.
And reporting this week from our news bureau in Cortlandville, New York, where I feel like I'm in a movie, like Groundhog's Day. It rains. I cut the grass. It rains. I cut the grass. It rains. I cut the grass. Get the picture? I'm Chris Perrine, KB2FAF.
And reporting from our news bureau in Lebanon, Tennessee, where it's supposed to be 90 degrees and sunny all next week, I'm Al Shepard, WK8W.
And reporting live from the warm and humid Space Coast in Florida, I am Ed Johnson, W2PH.
And reporting this week from our headquarters studios in Naugatuck, Connecticut, I'm Steve, K1FRC.
And reporting from our news bureau in Knoxville, Tennessee, where I want to wish my wife a happy 11th anniversary, I'm Josh Marler, AA4WX.
And reporting from our amateur radio outpost in the Catskill Mountains, where an upcoming heat wave has us scrambling to install the air conditioners, I'm Don Hulick, K2ATJ.
And reporting from our news bureau in Fayetteville, Arkansas, where the summer heat is indeed on, I'm Will Rogers, K5WLR.
Leading off this week's news, it's almost time to lather on the sunscreen and get ready for the fun. The 2025 ARRL Field Day is June 28th through 29th. It is amateur radio's biggest yearly event. John Ross, KD8IDJ, is here with the details.
The sun has been very active at the peak of the solar cycle 25, and ARRL is hopeful that will mean 2025 becomes a legendary field day. Get out to an activation and enjoy a good time with your fellow hams. Use the Field Day site locator featuring more than 1,200 sites if you don't already have a site you plan to attend. Don't forget to take the 2025 Field Day guide with you to your Field Day site. For clubs that are activating a location, here are 5 tips for Field Day success. Number 1, be safe. Safety should always be your priority. Share pointers and resources with everyone participating in your Field Day event. Number 2, check equipment and operators. Make sure you have all of the equipment tested and operational and all of the people needed to operate it. Number 3, review the Field Day rules. Make sure you check out the official rules packet to know which class your activation fits. Number 4, bonus points. Tally high scores by completing a bonus point activity. And number 5, put your best foot forward. ARRL Field Day is the face of ham radio to your local community. Remember to make the public feel welcome at your site and dress the part with 2025 ARRL Field Day gear. I'm John Ross, KD8IDJ.
Remember that now is the time to assign tasks and make an operating schedule. And be sure to submit your score. Entries must be postmarked or submitted via web app at field-day.arrl.org by Tuesday, July 29th, 2025. Our team coverage of Field Day 2025 continues with our own Chris Perrine, KB2FAF.
Protect the most important element of Field Day, the people. That includes yourself. Late June holds the summer solstice, and in North America, where Field Day takes place, that means a higher likelihood of long, hot summer days. If it's not every day you're working in the heat, you especially need to take care of yourself. Dr. Carol Malazzo, MD, call sign KP4MD, is the section manager of the ARRL Sacramento Valley section. She's also a practicing physician. She knows the danger of heat-related illness and shared some tips with members of her section ahead of Field Day. Wear light-colored, loose clothes that block the light. Use sunscreen of at least SPF 15. Wear a wide-brimmed hat to protect the neck, forehead, ears, eyes, nose, and scalp. Limit direct sunlight exposure between 10 a.m. and 4 p.m. when the sun's UV rays are strongest. Drink lots of water or sports drinks, about 1 cup every 15 minutes. Avoid alcohol, caffeinated beverages, or heavy meals. These adversely affect your tolerance to heat. Rest regularly in the shade or a cool place. Know the signs of heat-related illness. Monitor yourself and others for symptoms such as headache, lightheadedness, dizziness or fainting, weakness, moist skin, muscle cramps, and mood changes such as irritability or confusion. Persons at greater risk from heat illness include young children, the elderly, persons with heavy builds, and those with certain medications and medical conditions such as obesity, heart disease, respiratory disease, and diabetes. The ARRL wants you to have a good time and stay safe during the event. Our team coverage of ARRL Field Day 2025 continues now with our own Alan Shepard, WK8W.
You are listening to This Week in Amateur Radio, available to download as a podcast from anywhere on the web podcasts are available.
The amateur radio service is of great value to communities around the nation. Through served agencies, the trained corps of technical and civic-minded operators provide a no-cost service to the public that is shown to be valuable before and when all else fails. John Ross, KD8IDJ, has more.
The 2025 hurricane season has been forecast to be above normal by the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. And as we saw just last year in the aftermath of Hurricane Helene, Ham Radio saves lives through volunteers who use their skills and equipment during emergencies by providing surface weather observations, relaying messages from shelters, and providing health and welfare information to concerned loved ones. While ARRL Field Day is a fun social occasion to get together and get on the air, it also serves as an opportunity to test equipment in a way that would be needed in a time of crisis. The same people who came to visit your site and under blue skies are the community members who would be served in an identical manner during and after an emergency, said ARRL Public Relations and Outreach Manager Sierra Harrop, W5DX. In recognition of the value of amateur radio, government officials of all levels have issued proclamations and citations across the country. On the ARRL Amateur Radio Proclamation page, you can see the many official documents that have been sent to us at ARRL headquarters. I'm John Ross, KD8IDJ.
We all know how great the ham community is, but seeing all the proclamations come in around Field Day gives perspective to the efforts of radio amateurs. To have a governor or a council member recognize June as Amateur Radio Month truly honors the impact hams have on their community, said Harrop.
There's been a setback for yet another broadcast radio station that's been hit by copper wire theft. 3 men were arrested in Memphis, Tennessee, and charged with the theft of copper wiring from a local AM radio station, temporarily knocking it off the air. Radio Ambiente, WGSF 1030 AM, the city's first Hispanic radio station, which had been broadcasting for 30 years, went silent on Sunday, May 18. The station, which serves a regional audience, was able to return to the air this month after the FCC granted a license for its use of the on-site translator, W628DP, at 105.5 FM. According to news reports, the station's owner discovered copper wiring and components were stolen after he visited the transmitter towers to determine the source of a problem. Police said the transmitter building had been broken into, and copper wiring that ran underground to the radio towers had been cut. The copper radio cables and other components were missing. The station's owner, Sergio Butron, told local media that it appeared the thieves gained access after breaking through a chain-link fence and opening several locks. An engineer at the station said replacing the equipment will cost an estimated $180,000 on top of engineering fee. Engineer Stephen Lara said that approximately 85% of the station's Kintronic Labs phaser was missing. Coaxial lines coming from the transmitter were also sliced, and its 3 ATU units were vandalized. WGSF is operated with 50,000 watts during the day and 10,000 watts during critical hours from one tower non-directional. At night it ran a kilowatt using a directional 3-tower array. Police note that 3 suspects were arrested less than half a mile from the transmitter towers. The men were found with a stolen cable in front of a nearby house.
The phrase tower farm took on a new meaning in southeast Michigan this week as a tractor clipped a guy wire and brought down one of 560 WRDT AM's 4 towers. The station broadcasts in the daytime hours with a directional 500 watts from a field in Monroe Charter Township, Michigan, just southwest of the city of Monroe. Crawford Broadcasting Director of Engineering Chris Alexander said that on June 9th a farmer was planting soybeans in the field. Their vehicle snagged an outer guy wire of Tower 4, causing the 417-foot tower to collapse entirely. The farmer has been haying the field for decades, which has saved WRDT the trouble of mowing it, Alexander said. Thankfully, the tower did not fall on the farmer or their vehicle. WRDT was temporarily taken off the air as a result. The station runs a Christian talk and teaching format as The Word, AM 560. It is also heard on translator W296DY on 101.7 FM in Detroit. However, because the station uses a separate nighttime one-tower site in Ferndale, Michigan, approximately 40 miles northeast of Monroe, just north of Detroit, Crawford Field, and was granted a temporary authority with the FCC to broadcast daytime from Ferndale at 125 watts non-directional. WRDT broadcasts with 14 watts at night from there. Alexander said that from the 203-degree antenna on the 992-foot tower, WRDT is back on the air during the day. Even with the reduced power, the setup produces a good signal into the Motor City itself. He also recommended ensuring that any farmer working the site is fully briefed, uses spotters near guy anchors, and carries adequate insurance. Insurance claims for the June 9th incident are being processed, and a new tower is expected to be constructed at the daytime site in the coming months.
ARRL is looking for some new members of its Newington, Connecticut-based headquarters staff. There are several roles for which they are seeking qualified candidates. If you're into amateur radio, ARRL is a tremendous place to work. The membership manager is responsible for leading efforts related to ARRL membership growth, engagement, and retention. This role serves as the primary point of contact for ARRL's membership system and collaborates cross-functionally to support the organization's membership goals. The advertising sales manager is responsible for developing advertising revenue across ARRL's print and digital platforms, including magazines, media, and sponsorships. This role involves prospecting new clients and cultivating current relationships, developing targeted advertising products and campaigns, managing ad sales operations, and collaborating cross-functionally with marketing and production teams. The manager also provides regular performance reporting, budgeting, and forecasting to senior leadership and represents ARRL at amateur radio events. Other open positions include production coordinator and senior RFI lab engineer. Among the qualifications for each position is a desire for experienced radio amateurs, individuals who will thrive in a collaborative, results-driven environment, and a commitment to advancing ARRL's mission. Central Connecticut offers the best of all worlds: vibrant, modern urban life, quaint agrarian communities steeped in American history, coastal fun, and all the amenities you expect. Plus, you're a quick drive to the mountains, New York City, or Boston. There's a thriving local ham community that will welcome you as well. Descriptions for each position are listed on the ARRL website at www.arrl.org/careers. If you have amateur radio experience and a desire to work at ARRL, apply for one of these jobs by submitting your resume and cover letter to hr@arrl.org.
By a vote of 53 to 45, mostly along party lines, the U.S. Senate has confirmed Olivia Trusty to the Federal Communications Commission. According to Reuters, this vote was to fill out the remainder of the term formerly held by Jessica Rosenworcel, which expires at the end of this month. A second vote will need to be taken to confirm her for a full 5-year term. This week's vote assures that the Commission will have a quorum for the next open meeting, which is scheduled for June 26, 2025. On the agenda for that meeting, the Commission will consider a report and order that would streamline cable television rules through a reduction in regulation and forms used by providers. The Commission will also consider a report and order that would eliminate the professional engineer certification requirement for the biannual broadband data collection filing process. Finally, the Commission will consider a notice of proposed rulemaking that deletes a provision of the rules that require providers of telephone relay services for those with speech and/or hearing impairments from having to support the ASCII transmission format.
You're listening to North America's premier amateur radio and technology news magazine of the air. We are This Week in Amateur Radio, distributed worldwide at twiar.net.
On July 2nd, Grimton radio station in Sweden will celebrate the 100th anniversary of its inaugural transmission. Officially inaugurated on July 2, 1925, the 200-kilowatt alternator made contact with Long Island in the United States. The King of Sweden, Gustav V, the inventor of the amazing 200-kilowatt alternator and the massive 6-tower antenna, Ernst F.W. Alexanderson, as well as the Vice President of Radio Corporation of America, David Sarnoff, were there, together with several other prominent guests. The large and shiny Alexanderson alternator was put to life, and a message to the American President Calvin Coolidge was transmitted to the receiving station at Riverhead, Long Island, New York, USA. The American President replied and assessed the new radio installations as crucial for relations between Sweden and the USA. Call sign Sierra Alpha Quebec will be on the air on VLF 17.2 kHz CW on July 2nd, 2025. A test transmission will occur on July 1st between 1300 and 1600 CEST. Tickets are available for those wishing to attend in person. Transmissions will be streamed on YouTube. The amateur radio station Sierra Kilo 6, Sierra Alpha Quebec will be on the air as well.
We have a scientific discovery about radio waves this week that researchers say defies the laws of physics. These signals didn't come from somewhere above, but from deep down below the surface of the Earth. Radio signals picked up by a NASA high-altitude balloon have been leaving scientists baffled. The balloon, part of NASA's experiment known as Antarctic Impulsive Transient Antenna, or ANITA, was floating 40 kilometers above the continent in search of neutrinos and other particles when its sensitive radio antennas unexpectedly picked up signals that were coming from someplace below, way below, the Antarctic's frozen surface. Physicists say that for that kind of reception to occur, the radio waves would have had to have penetrated 6,000 to 7,000 kilometers, or 3,700 to 4,300 miles, of solid ice and stone. Although the balloon project has since been retired, researchers continue to study these unexplained transmissions and recently published their findings in the journal Physical Review Letters. The researchers say that by all models of physics, the signals should have been absorbed by the rock and gone undetected. Scientists know that these are not neutrinos, the particles that they had expected, but are still trying to narrow down what kind of radio signals they're dealing with. Meanwhile, with the ANITA project retired, the next instruments to have a go at the mystery will be on board a work in progress. A Pennsylvania State University team is building something bigger and, they hope, better. The payload for ultra-high energy observation mission.
President Donald Trump urged EchoStar Corp. Chairman Charlie Ergen and Federal Communications Commission Chair Brendon Carr to reach a deal over the fate of the company's wireless spectrum licenses, Bloomberg reported on Friday. On Thursday, Trump met with Ergen, and he telephoned Carr, who came to the White House to join the meeting, Bloomberg reported. The White House and EchoStar declined to comment. The FCC did not immediately respond to a request for comment on Friday. EchoStar has been trying to shield its cache of wireless spectrum licenses from the threat of revocation by the FCC. United States satellite TV provider DirecTV terminated its agreement to acquire EchoStar's satellite television business last year, which includes rival Dish TV over a failed debt exchange offer. In May, the FCC told EchoStar it was investigating the company's compliance obligations to provide 5G service in the U.S., questioning EchoStar's build-out extensions and mobile satellite service. EchoStar said the FCC disclosure was harming EchoStar's ongoing deployment and threatened its viability as a wireless provider, as well as endanger the video and broadband satellite services upon which millions of consumers rely. The company added the possibility of reversing prior grants of authority related to spectrum, for which EchoStar paid billions and in which invested billions more, in contravention of long-standing commission precedent. EchoStar has previously disclosed that it missed roughly $500 million in interest payments, citing uncertainty around the ongoing FCC review.
As part of AMSAT DL's cooperation with the European Space Agency to prepare a future geostationary amateur radio payload project called Future GEO, a request for expression of interest was recently sent to national AMSAT organizations, amateur radio associations, and qualified experts worldwide. The aim is to identify potential partners who would like to actively participate in the definition and development of a new amateur radio payload for a future geostationary satellite. Contributions should include innovative technical ideas, experiences from previous missions, as well as concrete proposals for payloads, experiments, and educational initiatives. In particular, amateur radio organizations whose countries are members of the ESA or which are in the planned visibility range are addressed. This means Canada, Europe, North and South America, and Africa. Unfortunately, we have noticed that not all contact details in the AMSAT International Directory are up to date. International AMSAT organizations should submit updated contact information for key leaders to info@amsat.org to update this directory. If you are an organization that has not received an RFEI but would like to actively participate, please contact AMSAT directly. The AMSAT Board of Directors and senior leadership will be submitting an expression of interest. A geostationary amateur radio satellite with a North American footprint has been sought for a very long time, and AMSAT is committed to providing AMSAT DL with any support that we can provide in this endeavor.
Never mind what primetime TV has to offer. Hams who have been missing a chance to make contacts through amateur television will have something to celebrate soon. Ham TV was the digital amateur television transmitter operating on the Columbus module of the ISS until failure took it out of service back in 2019. Its repairs back here on Earth were completed and the newly invigorated Ham TV was returned to the ISS via SpaceX CRS-30 in March of 2024. ARRL reports that astronauts will complete the reinstallation in late June in preparation for more contacts with schools around the world. Ham TV uses the DVB-S protocol in the 13-centimeter band to transmit digital video and audio in MPEG-2 format. ARRL has high hopes that Ham TV will become a long-running series without having to resort to reruns.
In the United States, Oregon has become the latest state to proclaim June to be Amateur Radio Month. Governor Tina Kotek issued the proclamation in time for Field Day, which is taking place in the U.S. and Canada on the 28th and 29th of June. The state is a busy place on the ham radio map, both for hosting the convention of the Northwest Division of the ARRL and its location on an earthquake fault line that keeps emergency responders alert. Governors in Hawaii and New Hampshire recently issued similar proclamations in their respective states.
The Wireless Institute of Australia, or WIA, released a statement earlier this week highlighting concerns regarding the proposal to restructure the International Amateur Radio Union into a single entity. While WIA acknowledged many benefits to the proposed changes, there were several areas WIA considered drawbacks. Concerns included potential risk of regional underrepresentation, financial implications, and increased administration requirements. WIA also voiced proposed remedies to their concerns, including regional-specific advisory groups, flexible fee structures, and safeguards around virtual participation, among others. The WIA remains committed to the mission and success of the IARU. However, unless and until their concerns are addressed in detail, we are not in favor of the proposal as it's currently presented, one person said. A copy of the full WIA response is available for download on the Wireless Institute of Australia's webpage.
You are listening to North America's premier news and information service for the amateur radio hobbyist. We are This Week in Amateur Radio.
Papua New Guinea's National Broadcasting Corporation is aiming to reintroduce shortwave radio to achieve the government's goal of 100% broadcast coverage by 2030. This week, the state-owned broadcaster hosted a workshop on the reintroduction of shortwave radio transmission, bringing together key government agencies and other stakeholders. NBC Managing Director Cora New said the proposed reintroduction of shortwave radio can only be achieved through a collaborative effort. He said it is important because it ensures remote communities have access to timely news and information. NBC's Executive Director of Engineering, Saloka Luwangu, explained the importance of shortwave while making a comparison with frequency modulation, shortwave, and medium wave transmission. FM is line of sight. If you see the tower, you receive the signal. If you don't see the tower, you don't receive the signal, he said. Medium wave has a wider coverage compared to FM. Coverage for FM is more for cities and towns. When you talk about medium wave, you talk regional now. When you talk short wave, you talk countrywide. That's why we are talking. Shortwave can do it for us with all our rugged mountains and scattered islands. This transition is timely and important for wider coverage, as it enables broader and more reliable broadcast reach across the country's rugged terrain. NBC also believes this shift will reduce dependency on costly hardware, making maintenance and upgrades easier while ensuring improved emergency communications and public awareness.
Hello and welcome to the DX Corner for your weekly dose of DX as part of Ham Radio's oldest ham radio magazine on the air, This Week in Amateur Radio. I'm Bill, AJB, and I am sporting my new Father's Day present, May the Morse Be With You, from my daughter who prints t-shirts. So thank you, Kate. I'll wear it proudly. If you're watching this on YouTube, the text of this will be included in the show notes. You won't have to remember dates, call signs, or other details, including URLs. You can just check the show notes. Last week, I gave an update on the PH25 NATO and the PA25 NATO special event stations. I received the following via WhatsApp from Martin, PA0KGB. He said, quote, Bill, in your YouTube message, you mentioned that PH25 NATO and PA25 NATO would be QRV for the month of June and that they provided QSL cards. This information is not correct. PH25 NATO is only active for a few days at the end of the summit. Both PH25 NATO and PA25 NATO specified on their QRZ.com page that there would be no QSL cards, end quote. Well, my apologies to the PH25 NATO and the PA25 NATO teams, as well as Martin, PA0KGB, and to you for not verifying this information in more detail. You can bet I won't make that mistake in the future. Thank you, Martin, for catching this and for alerting me to it. I appreciate it. So let's follow up on a couple items. The ZS8W website for Prince Edward and Marion Islands is back online and states that the ARRL approval and the LOTW certificates have both been obtained. A full LOTW upload will be had on August 15th, and I can't wait because I need it as an all-time new one, and it's not going to happen until we hit LOTW, so I'm looking forward to that. The 3Y0K team has received a major $20,000 grant from Indexa, which is one of Indexa's largest grants ever. This grant is important for the team as they prepare for the next few months' activities. Quote, we are preparing for packing the container that will be shipped from Oslo in early October. Our next vessel deposit is in the order of $400,000, and it is also due in 2 months' time. With the container shipment and the second vessel deposit in the near future, the team is having to put full focus on these two major milestones. We would like to thank Indexa for their major grant, as it is this kind of donations that make DX happen. Anyone who wants to support our attempt to activate Buvetta in February 2026 are welcome to do that by donating via PayPal. And to do that, you can send an email to donate@3y0k.com. End quote. That's 73s from the 3Y0K team. So each week I try to focus on those entities that will be available in the next 7 days. There's so much data to sift through that I thought focus on the next week might be helpful. Here's what you should find QRV when you tune the bands. The following DX information comes from Bernie, W3UR, editor of the Daily DX, the Weekly DX, and the How's DX column in QST. If you would like a free 2-week trial of the Daily DX, your only source of real-time DX information, just drop me a note at thedxmentor@gmail.com, and I'll make it happen. There's no obligation, you just try it for 2 weeks. W5JON, John, is QRV as V47JA from St. Kitts and Nevis, located 300 feet from the Caribbean Sea, until June 24th. He is operating on 160 through 6 meters, focusing on FT8 and SSB, especially on 6 meters. You can QSL direct or via LOTW to W5JON. ZL1RS, Bob, who is using YJ0RS from Vanuatu, is QRV until June 28th, primarily on 6-meter FT8. He does plan some 10-meter operation if and when 6 meters isn't open. Each moonrise and each moonset, he will be doing 6-meter EME for about an hour each time. You can QSL through LOTW or Club Log or to his home QTH in New Zealand, and that's ZL1RS. Chemo, OH0 stroke OH3 DJP, along with his XYL, will go on vacation from the Land Islands June 24th to July 1st. It is indeed primarily a vacation, including their 30th wedding anniversary on June 24th. But Chemo will have his travel rig with him. The radio is a Yaesu FT710 with an ICOM 7100 as a backup. He will have a dipole and will try 160 through 10 meters and 6 meter possibly. He will upload to LOTW, he says, quote, pretty much in real time, and Club Log at the end of his trip. He'll QSL to you via email if there is enough demand, and he will have special cards printed to go out through the bureau saying, quote, I do like the real QSLs, end quote. He plans to keep his output power to 50 watts or less. Todd, AF4CZ, is QRV from Guatemala is TG9 stroke AF4CZ until July 9th. Spare time activity on 40 through 10 meters, mainly FT8 and FT4, and possibly some single sideband. And you can QSL Todd via LOTW. Nobu, JA0JHQ, is QRV from Palau as T88PB until June 23rd. He will be participating in the All-Asian DXCW contest, and you can QSL him via his home call or LOTW. Nabi, G0VJG, is QRV from Bora Bora, French Polynesia, as F0 stroke G0VJG until June 26th. He will be using high power with a beam on HF bands and 6 meters. Vladimir, R9LR, will be in Uzbekistan from June 25th to July 1st. He's taking an SG Labs 2-watt rig and plans to be QRV on sideband, CW, and the digital modes. QSOs will be uploaded to LOTW and Club Log. You can also QSL to his callbook address, and again, that's Radio 9 Lima Radio. The most recent DX Mentor YouTube episode is available this weekend. Sarath, VU2RS, is the guest. He has earned almost every operating award that you can earn, including the ARRL Humanitarian Award. He is a fantastic ambassador for India and for ham radio. You need to check that out. If you're interested in DX Podcast and DX YouTube channels, you should check out the DX Mentor Facebook page and subscribe to be kept up to detail on all of the DX activities that we have going on. And we'll be making a major announcement about the first week of July. So you may want to get subscribed up on the Facebook page and wait for that. Until next week, this is Bill, AJ8B, saying 7-3, and thanks to my XYL Karen for her love and support. I hope to hear you in the pile-ups. And next week, I'll also give you a little insight into one of my favorite contests of the year. It's a blast, and it's just a lot of fun to work. Have a great DX week.
You are listening to This Week in Amateur Radio, available as an on-demand stream from Spotify, Deezer, and wherever podcasts are available.
Foundations of Amateur Radio. The other day I was discussing with a fellow amateur the increased frustration my mobile phone provider was inflicting. We hit on the idea of figuring out if other providers would fit the bill, and how we could determine if their coverage would suit our needs. Aside from using an old mobile phone, I suggested that using a $25 RTL SDR dongle would provide a way to record mobile phone cell site beacons from the various mobile phone networks to map what signal levels we might find. To that end, I discovered a tool called LTE Cell Scanner by Zhangjiang Bravo Hotel 1 Romeo X-Ray Hotel. Forked from the original project by James Perulas, it allows you to use simple hardware to scan for LTE cells used by mobile phone networks. James points out on his site that this tool can also be used to calibrate an RTL SDR receiver's oscillator, since an LTE downlink center frequency is stable to within 50 parts per billion. That's 10 times more stable than my Yaesu FT857D using a TCXO. If this doesn't mean much, think of it as a local frequency reference standard that you can use in your shack with minimal effort and cost. The story gets better. I started building LTE Cell Scanner from source, and in doing so discovered a directory on my computer named UHRR. I didn't remember what it was for, so I looked online. The first search result when I looked for UHRR radio was a repository by Oliver Foxtrot 4 Hotel Tango Bravo. More on that in a bit. The second search result was something called Universal Radio Hacker. I clicked on the link and discovered a mind-boggling tool. There are times in your life when something flips. This was one of those times. It happened when I discovered CSDR by Andros Hotel Alpha 7 India Lima Mike, and again when I discovered GNU Radio. Diving into Universal Radio Hacker by Dr. Johannes Pohl and Dr. Andreas Nowak, I was introduced to the art of decoding and generating digital radio signals. In 2018 it was presented for the first time during the Usenix workshop on Offensive Technologies, or WOOT, as a tool to discover, decode and identify exploits of proprietary IoT devices scattered all over the planet. As an aside, Usenix, users of Unix, since 1975. Back to radio. Universal Radio Hacker allows you to dissect recorded radio signals using all manner of interactive processes. When you go looking for it, and you should, I recommend that you start by watching some videos. You'll find an introductory playlist on my YouTube channel. By the time you've seen those, you'll likely share my excitement. To encourage you further, the Universal Radio Hacker is open source, written in Python, and runs on Linux, macOS, and Windows. So far, there have been 94 releases of the software, so it's seen significant development in the years since it was released into the wild. When installing it, I was surprised to discover that its acronym was UHR, not UHRR. This was a relief, since I still didn't remember what UHRR was all about, and I couldn't imagine having forgotten Universal Radio Hacker. It turns out that the last time I looked at UHRR was apparently in 2021, when I shared my experience in an article titled The Remote Edge. UHRR, or Universal Ham Radio Remote, is a tool that allows you to use a web browser to access a radio remotely. My little journey into unexpected diversions, distractions, and discovery has led me into a path where several puzzle pieces have come together. For example, Universal Radio Hacker and GNU Radio can talk to each other. They're both written in Python. They're both open source, have a history of development, and have a community of users. The LTE Cell Scanner, also open source, will allow me to calibrate most, if not all, of my radio gear, and I'm once again inspired to keep digging into yet another aspect of this wonderful hobby. I'm sure that there are more than 1,000 different hobbies under this roof. Go forth, explore, discover, be amazed, and stay curious. I'm Ono, Victor Kilo 6, Foxtrot Lima, Alpha Bravo.
AMSAT President Robert Bankston greeted attendees of the Hamvention Saturday, May 17, 2025 AMSAT Forum, kicking off the session, which included short presentations by several AMSAT engineering leaders. Bankston explained that the organization was officially formed in 1969, saying, "We've been keeping amateur radio in space for more than 50 years, starting with Oscar 1 in 1961. Oscar 1 was launched on December 12, 1961, as a secondary payload on the Thor Agena rocket with a U.S. Air Force mission. Oscar 1 was the first satellite ever to be deployed as a secondary payload from a launch vehicle. The bureaucratic efforts required to secure permission to launch Oscar 1 greatly exceeded the effort required to build the satellite. It established the precedent for all subsequent secondary payload launches for the next 5 decades. Speaking of the fun of being a part of AMSAT, Bankston said, "Our primary goal is to have amateur radio available in space for you to operate with. And if you haven't done it before, it's a blast. You're chasing that little chunk of radio, flying through space at 17,000 miles an hour and trying to keep up with it, whether it be by hand or with automated azimuth and elevation tracking antennas. Accomplishing that is great stuff." Bankston told the audience that even more than operating via satellite communications, many AMSAT members get the opportunity to design and build the satellite that goes up into space. AMSAT has a lot to offer to everybody. We are looking forward to enhanced relationships with school-age students and their teachers via our new youth initiative, which includes online self-learning. Currently, AMSAT has about 4,000 members, the majority of whom are in the United States. AMSAT members also are in some 53 countries. There are also AMSAT organizations around the world in such countries as the UK, Spain, Germany, Japan, Brazil, and many others. AMSAT shares a strategic relationship with the U.S. Amateur Radio on the International Space Station Organization. That group facilitates worldwide space-oriented education programs, primarily in middle and high school. Student activities in the ARRL program culminate with a capstone of a live question and answer session via amateur radio with an astronaut aboard the International Space Station. More than 100 astronauts have obtained and use an amateur radio license issued by their home country to legally transmit via radios installed on the ISS. The forum session provided an update on current activities. Bankston said the most important part of today's update is what our AMSAT engineers are working on. The lineup of engineering professionals who presented talks began with Jerry Buxton, AMSAT VP of Engineering, and his team. Buxton spoke about the importance of AMSAT's volunteer engineers and an overview of current AMSAT projects.
Hurricane Eric made landfall early Thursday morning, June 19, in southern Mexico as Category 3 storm with winds of 125 miles an hour. As of 6 o'clock in the morning Thursday, the center of Hurricane Eric was located along the coast of Mexico, just east of Punta Maldonado. The Hurricane Watch noted that Eric was moving towards the northwest at 9 miles an hour. This general motion is expected to continue throughout the next few days. On the forecast track, the center of Eric is expected to move inland over southern Mexico throughout the day. Eric is expected to rapidly weaken over the mountains of Mexico, and the system is likely to dissipate early Friday. Given the proximity of this hurricane, Zian Tobata, XE1ATZ, director of the National Emergency Network of the Mexican Federation of Radio Experimenters, has requested protection for the following emergency frequencies that will be used during the approach and the pass of Hurricane Eric. On the 80-meter band, 3.960 kilohertz. On 40 meters, 7.128 kilohertz. And on the 20-meter band, 14.120 kilohertz. Tabawada is asking all amateur radio operators to refrain from transmitting on these frequencies and simply listen in case they need assistance from the Mexican Federation of Radio Experimenters. The Hurricane Watch network is not active at this time, but when necessary, amateur radio operators can join the net on 14.325 MHz USB during the day and 7.268 MHz lower sideband in the evening. However, if propagation dictates, daytime operations will be conducted on both frequencies simultaneously.
We pause for stations along the network to identify. We are This Week in Amateur Radio, your amateur radio and technology news magazine of the air, available as a podcast on iTunes, Google Play, iHeartMedia, and Spotify.
Welcome to the 33rd segment of Ham Radio History, a century of amateur radio, Ham's organizations, events, inventions. I'm Will Rogers, K5WLR. Our thanks go to Chris Cadella, W2PA, for permitting us to use his website in the preparation of these segments. Now, make yourself comfortable and enjoy this chapter of Ham Radio History. Crossings 1, Aquitania, continued. Public interest in the test ran high in Europe, especially in the Netherlands, France, and Britain, where details were published in their national radio journals. A Burndep 3 Ultra receiver would be awarded by Burnham and Company of England, as announced by Mr. W. W. Burnham, one of England's leading amateurs. The prize would go to the ARRL member whose signals rank first in the reception in the British Isles, though it was unclear how the ranking would be judged. British Marconi Station, MUU, at Carvarnon planned to transmit nightly test reports at 2 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. In QST, A.L. Groves described apparatus he recommended for receiving MUU on 14,200 meters while dealing with possible QRM from NSS on 16,900, WGG on 16,100, and WII on 13,600. In particular, he noted that in some nearby areas, NSS and WGG heterodyne with each other, creating a problem within 3,000 or 4,000 meters of these waves. In an example of how exquisitely complicated tuning an advanced receiver was in his day, Groves instructed readers that, with dual lateral coil 1500 in the secondary, shunted by a 43-plate 0.001 microfarad condenser, WII tunes in at about 50 degrees on the 180-degree scale, and MUU should tune in at not over 53 degrees. The filament and B battery are, of course, adjusted in the usual manner. Then the secondary condenser is adjusted to approximately the figures above indicated. The plate coil is gradually brought closer to the secondary until the tube oscillates, which is indicated by a thud in the phones. With the primary coil about 2 to 2.5 inches from the secondary, slowly vary the primary condenser until the set is balanced out. After signals are picked up, they can be brought in clearer and stronger by further adjustment of primary coupling, accomplished by slight changes in primary condenser. After that, a slow loosening of the plate coupling will almost always give additional amplification. Today, this seems rather like running through an alignment procedure each time you turn your receiver to a new frequency. The December 1921 QST cover drawing by 8ZZ announced transatlantic tests this month in large type across a globe where lightning bolts linked North America to England and QRM babies were labeled tightly to the North Pole spike where they presumably would do no harm. In America, a ham sits at his station keying his transmitter with the old man looking on. In England, a ham listens intently through headphones tightened firmly in place with a C-clamp over his head. Another gentleman looks on, perhaps the British equivalent of the old man, or perhaps Mr. Burnham. Inside, a photograph captured Schnell and Warner on board the Aquitania seeing Paul Godley off on his voyage to England. A send-off dinner had been held for him in New York the night before departure, attended by luminaries including Maxim, Herbert, Camp, Stewart, Service, Goat, E. H. Armstrong, J. Andrew White, P. H. Boucheron, G. H. Burghardt, and W. S. Smith. Among the testimonials, Armstrong was quoted as saying, "I'll stake my scientific reputation on Paul Godley. It's hard to imagine a stronger endorsement." On the morning of 15 November, the Aquitania was set to sail for England. Amid the commotion of the multitude at the dock and on board the departing ship, the radio birds used opening, closing hand gestures to send Morse code messages back and forth to Godley, standing at the ship's railing above all the QRM of the crowd. By coincidence, Dr. Harold H. Beveridge, inventor of the wave antenna, also happened to be aboard Aquitania for this voyage, something neither Godley nor anyone else in the crowd had known beforehand. The wave antenna was later named the Beveridge antenna. Dr. Beveridge was 28 years old at the time of the voyage, 4 years younger than Godley. Recognizing the well-known antenna experimenter at the railing a short distance from Godley, the group on the dock let him know by this hand Morse. Godley immediately went over to introduce himself, the two having never before met in person. Beveridge, who had noticed the gesturing too, signaled OK to the crowd as he shook hands with Godley, a striking metaphor for what was to come. Godley carried with him information about the final schedules and the all-important cipher combinations, messages that were known ahead of time only to ARRL traffic manager Schnell, in a sealed packet that Corsi would open and become the only person to know them on the receiving side of the Atlantic. In addition to the nightly reports transmitted by MUU, Beveridge's station 2BML, manned by operators from RCA's Long Island receiving station in Riverbend, New York, would retransmit the reports on 200-meter CW. ARRL gratefully acknowledged the help of both companies, Marconi and RCA. Godley's own 28-page account of the entire operation, including much of his minute-by-minute log, appeared in February 1922 QST and makes interesting reading. For several nights after leaving New York, the amateur air was thick with farewells and good wishes for 2ZE, Godley's home call, for everybody knew he would be in the static room on the Aquitania, wrote Warner. And so he was, spending much of his time with the operators in the radio room, enjoying their hospitality. Although he had access to the ship's station, there was no time to tune for amateur signals because of the high volume of regular message traffic. He nevertheless received messages from U.S. friends via commercial wireless transmissions to the ship. A message from ARRL that he copied himself on his second day at sea read, "From Hartford, Connecticut to Paul F. Godley, SS Aquitania via WBF. Bon voyage. The entire radio world is pulling for you. Signed, Warmax Schnell." This signature was for Warner, Maxim, and Schnell. He replied, "Confidence increases as distance squared. Broadcast my heartfelt appreciation." Heartened by the well-wishers' messages, he resolved to get signals or bust. Keeping in mind the skepticism and what he termed veiled interest from the engineering community of which he was a member, and feeling that no ham in Britain believed the test would succeed, Paul Godley was eager to prove them all wrong. Included in this material are quotes from the following: QRV for the Transatlantics, QST, November 1921, page 10, Clinton B. DeSoto, 200 meters and down, the American Radio Relay League Incorporated, 1936, page 73. The Second Transatlantic Test, QST, December 1921, page 7. Paul F. Godley, Official Report on the Second Transatlantic Tests, QST, February 1922, page 14. With our thanks to Chris Cadella, W2PA, for his permission to use his website's materials, Ham Radio History, A Century of Amateur Radio, Ham's Organizations, Events, Inventions, to set up this chapter, I'm Will Rogers, K5WLR, reporting for This Week in Amateur Radio.
Keeping the amateur radio community around the world informed, you are listening to This Week in Amateur Radio. Available worldwide as a podcast from our web at twiar.net.
Bruce Page, KK5DO, is here now with this week's AMSAT report. Bruce?
Thanks, John. The 43rd Annual AMSAT Space Symposium and Annual Meeting is getting closer. This year it will be held at the Holiday Inn and Suites, Phoenix Airport North. The Board of Directors meeting is on Thursday, October 16th, and the morning of Friday, October 17th. The symposium will begin on Friday at 1 p.m. Saturday, the 18th, the symposium continues. There will be a members' breakfast on Sunday morning, the 19th. You can get more information and the hotel discount code at AMSAT.org. Hover over Events and click on 43rd Annual Space Symposium. Congratulations go out to Hanu OH3DP for being the first to receive the ARRL VUCC with satellite endorsement from Finland, and Vladimir YL2GC for being the first to receive the ARRL DXCC with the satellite endorsement from Latvia. This is Bruce Page, KK5DO. Back to you, John.
And thanks, Bruce, for that report.
It is time once again for the weekly look at the solar weather and propagation forecast. On Friday, June 20th, spaceweather.com reported that, in addition to it being the first day of summer in the northern hemisphere, on June 19th, the sun produced another X-class flare, causing a shortwave radio blackout over the Pacific Ocean. Solar activity reached high levels when region AR4114 produced the strongest event of the period, an X1.9 flare at 2350 UTC. The region remained the most complex on the disk despite being in a decay phase. The other numbered spotted regions on the visible disk were either mostly stable or in gradual decay. No Earth-directed coronal mass ejections were observed in available coronagraph imagery. Minor to moderate radio blackouts are likely, with a chance for X-class strong flares through June 21st, mostly driven by the potential from regions AR4114, AR4115, and AR4117. Coronal hole high-speed stream conditions are expected to persist with waning influences into June 21st. Unsettled conditions are expected to continue. Solar wind parameters continue to reflect a positive polarity coronal hole high-speed stream regime. The geomagnetic field is expected to be at quiet to unsettled levels on June 21st, and at quiet levels on June 22nd. Geomagnetic field activity is likely to reach minor storm levels on June 25th and 26th due to negative polarity coronal hole high-speed stream influences. Looking at the 10.7 cm flux values for the near term, they will be 140 on June 21st, 138 on June 22nd, 125 on June 23rd and 24th, and 130 on June 25th. Solar activity is still at the peak of its 11-year cycle, even though it reached its maximum last summer. The change from last year is the shift of sunspot activity from the southern to the northern half of the solar disk. The appearance of new sunspot activity in the southeast in recent days, close to the solar equator, came as a slight surprise. This spring, especially in May and early June, we could not fail to notice frequent periods of solar wind intensification and, consequently, a number of geomagnetic disturbances, which caused the critical frequencies of the ionospheric F layer to drop to values corresponding to significantly lower solar activity. In recent days, there has been only a slight improvement. Most forecasts for future solar activity predict a continuing decline, but if we assume higher activity in the currently setting sunspot groups, we can expect an increase after their appearance on the northeastern limb of the solar disk in July. Overall, calmer conditions can be expected during the coming summer, although shortwave propagation conditions will continue to be slightly worse than would correspond to the level of solar activity. For more information concerning radio propagation, visit the ARRL Technical Information Service, read a quick guide to HF propagation using solar indices, and check out the propagation page of Carl Lewetzelschwab, K9LA. For customizable propagation charts, visit the vocap online for Ham Radio website.
Just ahead in radio sport this week on June 21st to the 22nd, the All Asian DX Contest, that's CW, the SKCC QSO Party, CW as well, the IAR Region 1 50 MHz Contest, CW Phone, and the LZ International 6-meter Contest, that's CW and Phone. On June 21st, the Stu Perry Top Band Challenge, CW, the West Virginia QSO Party, CW Phone and Digital there. June 21st, the ARRL Kids Day, that is Phone. June 22nd, the WAB 50 MHz phone, of course. The SKCC Sprint, that's on June 25th. On June 26th, it's the RSGB 80-meter Club Championship, that's single sideband phone. June 27th, the weekly radio test, that's digital. June 28th and 29th, the ARRL Field Day, CW Phone and Digital. And on July 1st, the RAC Canada Day Contest, CW and Phone. July 2nd, the Phone Weekly Test, that's phone. And on July 3rd, the NRAU 10-meter activity contest, that's CW Phone and Digital. Remember to visit the ARRL contest calendar for more events and information. Upcoming section, state, and division conventions. On June 21st, it's the Knoxville Hamfest hosting the ARRL Tennessee State Convention. That's in Knoxville, Tennessee. July 12th, the Sawyer Valley Amateur Radio Club Hamfest hosting the ARRL North Dakota Section Convention. July 13th, the Succoth, New Jersey Hamfest hosting the ARRL Hudson Division Convention. On June 26th, the ARRL West Virginia State Convention and Hamfest, that's in Sutton, West Virginia. And on August 2nd, it's the ARRL Maine State Convention and Hamfest, that's in Augusta, Maine. CQ, calling all kids. ARRL Kids Day will be held June 21st, 2025. Kids Day is designed to give on-the-air experience to young people and hopefully foster interest in getting a license of their own. It is also intended to give older hams a chance to share their stations and love for amateur radio with their children and grandchildren. The June 21st event runs from 1800 UTC through 2359 UTC. You can operate as much or as little as you like. You can also use your favorite repeater with the permission of the repeater's sponsor. Be sure to observe third-party restrictions when making DXQSOs. More information about the 2025 ARRL Kids Day, including a suggested list of frequencies and how to get a QSO certificate, are on the web at arrl.org/kids-day.
Ham Radio 2025, the biggest amateur radio exhibition in Europe, will take place in Friedrichshafen, Germany, June 27th through the 29th. Over 11,000 people from 60 countries are expected to attend. There will be panel discussions, experiments, workshops, training courses, and competitions. ARRL will have a contingent there to greet many of our 6,000-plus international members. ARRL delegates include President Rick Roderick, Kilo 5 Uniform Romeo, International Affairs Vice President Rod Stafford, Whiskey 6 Romeo Oscar Delta, CEO David Minster, November Alpha 2 Alpha Alpha, Director of Marketing and Innovation Bob Interbitson, November Quebec 1 Romeo, and Radio Sport and Regulatory Information Manager Bart Yankee, Whiskey 9 Juliet Juliet. For more information, visit www.hamradio-friedrichshafen.com.
With the help of amateur radio operators, a potential wildfire was averted in California on June 12th as several hams wound up in the right place at the right time while preparing for the 2025 ARRL June VHF contest. With all the details, we go to John Ross, KD8IDJ, who files this report from League headquarters.
Bobby DeVevick, W6IWN, and Jake Graham, KC7WXD, both ARRL members from the Reno, Nevada area, were hiking in the Gross Ridge Trail in California, a section of the Tahoe National Forest. In addition to getting ready for the contest, they had hoped to also activate several summits on the air, SOTA locations. Their day of using amateur radio service for recreation was going well until they saw smoke near the Black Buttes area and had to use amateur radio for its utility value. I was surprised to see the smoke ahead of us, said Graham. As we got closer, it was clear there had been a lightning hit several days ago, and we could see flames. Wireless service is pretty spotty in areas of eastern Sierra, and they don't have a cell signal, so DeBevick used his handheld ham radio to report the fire on a nearby repeater. In just seconds, Dan Patterson, W6AI, responded back. He was monitoring the Nevada County Amateur Radio Club linked repeater system in Grass Valley, California, and he heard the call. He took the GPS coordinates from Graham and notified the U.S. Forest Service. We were monitoring the U.S. Forest Service, and it only took about 10 minutes from them to dispatch a helicopter to the area, said Graham. We watched 4 firefighters rappel down, followed by a pack of equipment. The pair then walked closer to the area and started talking to the crew, who, by the way, thanked them for the report. They put out the fires, but radioed for a helicopter water drop before they left on foot with the gear to a nearby pickup site, said DeBevick. I'm John Ross, KD8IDJ.
DeBevick captured the event on video and posted it to his YouTube channel. After the firefighters left, the winds picked up dramatically. Had that happened earlier, the outcome could have been much worse. Amateur radio serves communities before and when all else fails, and having a thriving group of trained operators active in amateur radio allowed it to facilitate emergency communications that saved the day.
We pause for stations along the network to identify. We are This Week in Amateur Radio, available as a direct download on our website at www.twiar.net.
You can almost hear the synthesizer lead from the musical act Europe's 1986 hit, The Final Countdown, playing on the air. 2025 ARRL Field Day, taking place on June 28th and 29th. With suggestions on how to make your field day the best one ever, we go to League headquarters where John Ross, KD8IDJ, files this special report.
As the excitement builds, 1,067 sites are listed now on the station locator tool. Each one of them has a lot of work to do between now and the first CQ Field Day transmission. But now is the time to check and double-check everything, according to ARRL Radio Sport and Regulatory Information Manager Bart Janke, W9JJ. Check all of your gear and accessories. Put it on the air, make sure there are no problems, organize your power chain from the generator to all of the cables, he suggested. Going through all of the equipment now, including antennas and antenna support structures, will keep any nasty surprises at bay when it's time to activate for the event. It's also time to check on your people and places. Reach out to everyone who said they wanted to come and make sure they still are able to do so. Build an operating schedule, said Janke. It's also a prudent time to check with the property owner where you intend to hold the activation and follow up with the local media and town officials that have been invited. With the heat of the summer bearing down, make sure there's enough water and sunscreen for the activation. The double check of supplies now could spare you from unplanned errands during field day. More than anything, being prepared now will help you be present during field day, said ARRL Public Relations and Outreach Manager Sierra Harrop, W5DX. This is a great opportunity to share the joy of community of the amateur radio and people who may not get a chance to participate in it often, or it could be a first introduction. Prepare now so you can have fun on the weekend. I'm John Ross, KD8IDJ.
ARRL has many resources to help your activation thrive during the event. All the rules and information are at www.arrl.org/Field Day. Order your 2025 ARRL Field Day merch by Thursday, June 19th to ensure your shipment arrives in time for Field Day.
A teenager from Romania is preparing to beat the world record he set last year for speed in copying call signs sent in CW. It is set to happen this month in Germany. Ham Radio 2025 at Messe Friedrichshafen, Germany, will have plenty to offer international visitors when the three-day event opens on the 27th of June. One scheduled event in particular is likely to draw a crowd as it showcases the achievement of Ioannis Skoutaro, Y08YNS, who set the world record in call sign receiving in Morse code last year. In a demonstration sponsored by the Romanian Federation of Amateur Radio, Ioannis will attempt to beat the record before a panel of judges from Guinness World Records and the IARU. It forms a part of a larger exhibit by the Romanian Amateur Radio Group, which is demonstrating high-speed telegraphy as its centerpiece. In case you're wondering, at the age of 13, Ioannis won a gold medal at the 20th IARU High-Speed Telegraphy World Championship with a record-setting maximum copy speed of 1,126 characters per minute, an equivalent just exceeding 225 words per minute.
On May 31, 2025, at 16:05 UTC, the NOAA 18 S-band transmitter 4, known as STX-4, experienced a power drop from 7 watts to 0.8 watts. STX-4 is the only remaining transmitter used for uplink or commanding, and downlink for telemetry and global science data from the recorder. Full recovery of the S-band transmitter and its functionality is not possible, and therefore it jeopardizes the ability to ensure safe operation of the spacecraft. Based on NOAA's requirement to responsibly manage on-orbit assets, NOAA decommissioned NOAA 18 on June 6 from 1333 to 1749 UTC, and the APT signal transmission ceasing was observed by radio amateur observers. NOAA 18 is a legacy polar operational environmental satellite and is operated with no performance or latency requirement. Users should transition to NOAA's Joint Polar Satellite System, or JPSS. JPSS provides global observations that serve as the backbone of both short and long-term forecasts, including those to help us predict and prepare for severe weather events. The 5 satellites scheduled in the fleet are currently flying the NOAA, NASA, Suomi National Polar Orbiting Partnership Satellite, NOAA 20, previously known as JPS-1, NOAA 21, and also known as JPSS-2, and the upcoming JPSS-3 and JPSS-4 satellites.
The Alberta Digital Radio Communications Society has learned it can proceed with its IP400 project by autumn, thanks to a grant from Amateur Radio Digital Communications that will permit the hiring of necessary technical personnel. Many amateurs got a preview of IP400 at Hamvention in Xenia, Ohio. The data communication system was demonstrated using Raspberry Pi Zero HAT transceivers. HAT stands for hardware attached on top. The system's goal is to deliver over-the-air data speeds of at least 100 kilobytes per second, a speed that far exceeds that of most current amateur radio data systems. According to the IP400 website, the project first aims to present an assembled node to developers, experimenters, and others for testing.
It is time for this week's edition of AMSAT Satellite Shorts from all over. And we begin this week with news that from September 19th through the 21st, 2025, the Bucum Radome will once again be dedicated to satellite and space research. In cooperation with the Bucum Observatory, AMSAT Deutschland EV is offering a varied and informative program aimed at AMSAT members and all space enthusiasts. The focus is on current developments and future prospects for national and international amateur radio satellites and other space projects. Lectures, presentations, and existing discussions will provide participants with valuable insights into the latest technologies, missions, and research projects in space travel. As was the case last year, the Space Days begin on Friday with a general come-together and end on Sunday with the General Assembly. The exact schedule and further plans will be here on the website as soon as possible. Anyone interested in giving a presentation is welcome to contact them in advance at info@iuz-bochum.de. That's info@iuz-bochum.de. And finally this week comes word that the SpaceX launch of 4 private astronauts has been delayed again. The Axiom Space's Axiom Mission 4 mission to the International Space Station had been scheduled to launch atop a SpaceX Falcon 9 rocket from Florida's Space Coast on Wednesday morning, June 11th. But a propellant leak in the Falcon 9 booster nixed that plan. And now another leak, this one in a leaky module at AX4's destination, the ISS, has further postponed the liftoff indefinitely. This is the first flight for the Dragon spacecraft supporting this mission. This will be the second flight for the first stage booster supporting this mission, which previously launched a Starlink mission.
For Eric Williams, KV-1J, his planned trip to St. Pierre and Miquelon Island, IOTA number NA032, is for a solo activation. But even as he calls CQ as FP/KV-1J starting on the 28th of June, Eric will not be totally alone. He will carry the memory of a local amateur who was his friend, Jean-Pierre Carrère. FP5CJ, Jean-Pierre, who is also known in the ham community as a welcoming, helpful, and personable radio operator, especially to visitors, became his silent key last September. Eric will remain on the air through the 14th of July and will participate in the International Amateur Radio Union HF World Championship on the 12th and 13th of July. It is his 17th trip to the island in North Atlantic, not far from Newfoundland.
You're listening to North America's premier amateur radio and technology news magazine of the air. We are This Week in Amateur Radio, distributed worldwide at twiar.net.
The ARRL has welcomed the year's first cohort of educators to attend a session of the ARRL Teachers Institute on Wireless Technology, or TI, at headquarters this week. John Ross, KD8IDJ, has more.
The group follows on the success of the Louisiana-based session a week ago and one at Staten Island in New York City this past January. The educators traveled from all over the country to attend and learn how to take radio and wireless technology back into the classroom as part of science, technology, engineering, and mathematics STEM lessons. Many of the teachers took and passed their amateur radio license exam during the week, including Professor Charnel Long, Ph.D. She is a professor at North Carolina A&T University who worked with pre-service educators to become certified teachers. She hopes to be a multiplying force for the information. "It was fun to me," said Long. "It is an opportunity to do a deep dive into radio in ways I never have before." She will incorporate the hands-on training into her courses at the university. Long learned about the program when ARRL Education and Learning Manager Steve Goodgame, K5ATA, exhibited TI at the National Science Teachers Association Convention. "I see value in bringing my students scientific skills," said Long. And while Professor Long and the other newly minted radio amateurs in the cohort wait for their call signs to be issued, they continue to get hands-on training with radio. To see these educators have fun learning new things is a real boost, not only to the ARRL Education and Learning Department, but for the future of ham radio as well, said Goodgame. I'm John Ross, KD8IDJ.
Game is encouraged by the reach just one participant in TI could have. We're always excited to get educators hands-on with radio, but especially those who take what they learn here and go back and teach it to other educators, he said. Professor Long is one microcosm of ARRL's focus on multiplying the reach of TI's impact. The ARRL Board of Directors voted unanimously in July 2024 to authorize taking the high-quality education of TI to communities across the country, increasing the number of teachers and therefore students reached by the training is one peg of the mission to inspire the next generation of radio amateurs.
In April this year, the Dubois County Office of Emergency Management in Indiana made the decision to migrate from analog FM to C4 FM digital for their 147.195 repeater during activations. The change was made to reduce noise during operation and increase the quality of copy. According to Gary Fritz, Whiskey Bravo 9, Lima India Bravo, Operations Officer for the EMA, our new Fusion repeater system was thoroughly tested to confirm its superior performance when using C4 FM. When the announcement was made to Patoka Valley Amateur Radio Club, not all the club members were enthusiastic. Since some of them did not own a Fusion-compatible radio, this decision would exclude them from emergency operations with Skywarn. Fritz said that the change has brought about the desired results in message quality, as proven by recent Skywarn activation during severe weather. We found that by using C4 FM, our units are now able to check in crystal clear from locations that were previously impossible. A number of local amateurs remain unconvinced regarding the move to digital. Ruben Montgomery, Kilo Alpha 9, Romeo Charlie Mike, said that his main concern is centered primarily on the lack of access to the emergency communications by hams without fusion radios and by visitors who are passing through the area. With a variety of digital platforms, he also sees great difficulty in picking one mode to the exclusion of all others. Regarding participation, Fritz reported that the public and all amateur radio operators can continue to monitor net communications through audio streaming over Broadcastify.
The World Radio Sport Team Championship isn't taking place until next year, but for this season there's a bit of competition before the big competition, and now there are two winners. Organizers of the World Radio Sport Team Championships have announced that 2 teams of Season D expeditioners and contesters are going to the 2026 competition in the UK after placing the winning bids to secure a place in the running. All other competitors in this International Olympic-style radio event qualify by virtue of their contest records, but these 2 sponsored teams, one headed by Adrian, K08SCA, and the other by Cesare, SP5Y, secured spots as the winning bidders in an auction. The minimum bid was $20,000. The opportunity to purchase spots in the competition is a way of helping the event with its substantial budget. All teams are bound by the same operating rules.
This Week in Amateur Radio is holding open auditions for news anchors for the weekly national worldwide amateur radio news service. If you have a good radio voice and can reliably read provided news copy, we are looking for you. This, of course, is an all-volunteer position. An amateur radio license is not required. You must have a high-quality microphone, headset mics are not used, and be familiar with audio editing software to record and edit your finished news stories before uploading. If you would like to try out for a weekly or bi-weekly anchor position with North America's premier amateur radio news on air and podcast, please send an email to our producer, George, W2XBS. You can include a sample MP3 of yourself reading news copy sent as an attachment to W2XBS77@gmail.com. That's whiskey, the number 2, X-ray Bravo Sierra 77 @gmail.com. Be sure and use Anchor Audition in the subject line. Please include your phone number and a good window of time for a callback to discuss your submission and our operating logistics to see if This Week in Amateur Radio is a good fit for you. We hope to hear from you soon.
And finally this week, let's face it, amateur radio can be hard work, especially lately with the sun sending some geomagnetic storms our way. Still, it's June, and for many of us, that signals a chance to have a little more fun in spite of it all. Young hams around the world have once again declared this Meme Appreciation Month, even though this activity actually runs through to August 15th. From Hungary to the Philippines, Canada, and Austria, the popular activity of sharing icons and text is spelled out in the operator's clever call signs used specifically for this event. Most participants use FT8 and SSTV. Meanwhile, CW operators in the Straight Key Century Club have just wrapped up another round of the monthly randomgram exercise, decoding randomly generated letter and number combinations. The 24-hour event began on Thursday, June 19th. Finally, there's Hamword, in which amateurs sharpen their skills using WinLink by playing a game based on the wildly popular mainstream word-based guessing game, Wordle. This is the third year participants will be transmitting 5-letter words to the Hamword station. It's a lively, highly competitive activity in which results are posted on a leaderboard. For technical requirements and rules, see the websites in the text version of this week's Newsline script. Don't forget that hams just want to have fun.
Many of the news and information items heard in this edition of This Week in Amateur Radio have been provided by the American Radio Relay League, the ARRL Audio News Service, and the ARRL Letter, AMSAT, the Radio Amateurs of Canada, the Shortwave Listening Post, the Federal Communications Commission, the Radio Society of Great Britain, and Ofcom, the South African Radio League, the International Amateur Radio Union, the Wireless Institute of Australia and the Australian Communications and Media Authority, the New Zealand Association of Radio Transmitters, the Amateur Radio Newsline, the Rain Hamcast, Eric Guth, 4Z1UG and QSO Today, QRZ.com, the International Telecommunications Union, the 425DX News, Parks on the Air, and the Soda Reflector, and various news sources on the Internet. This Week in Amateur Radio is heard around the world on the Internet, on low-power FM stations, and on great repeater systems like the WB3GXW repeater on 147.225 MHz in Silver Springs, Maryland, serving all of Silver Springs and also covering the nation's capital, Washington, D.C. WB3GXW can also be found on Echolink Conference Server node 6154. If you are a This Week in Amateur Radio affiliate and you would like us to give a free on-air announcement of your station's carriage of the program, please send us an email with the station location, call sign, coverage area, and day and time you air This Week in Amateur Radio, plus any other information you would like us to impart. You can send to the following email, w2xbs77@gmail.com. That address once again is w2xbs77@gmail.com.
With special thanks to all our weekly news sources and to you, our listeners, that wraps up this edition of This Week in Amateur Radio. If you would like to write to us, you can find everything you need, including archive editions of the news service, at our website at twiar.net. And now, for all of us at This Week in Amateur Radio headquarters and all our news team around the world, this is Will Rogers, K5WLR in Fayetteville, Arkansas, wishing you 73.